Hi folks, I'm Christo, and in this video I'll be configuring a USD asset with variants in Solaris. This is the starting point. I uploaded this model to Sketchfab a couple days ago, and I decided to take this a little bit further by creating two variants for the pot shader and two variants for the grass model. So let's take a look at in Houdini. Here's the starting point, and the grass blades were generated with this procedural grass and stuff generator that I've been working on for a while now, and it's almost final. So if you're interested, stay tuned. I'll be releasing that soon. I have two copies of that, one of which is giving this kind of stylized twisting, I guess, plant look, and another one which is more of a wider ribbon grass blades look. Same generator in here, same setup, and the plant pot is a photogrammetry reconstruction coming out of mesh room, and it came out with these holes in the mesh which I didn't bother to correct because it works as a sort of corrosion, although the current shader doesn't really reflect that at all. I decided to go for this one. And so for the asset will consist of two parts, the pot and the grass. So the pot, the variants on the pot will be shader variants, and the variants on the grass will be model variants. And for the pot I already have two variants, which are just the default smart material presets from 3D Code, and one's the gun metal gun old, and the other one is the brass. I've already saved out the texture maps in here. So I have a pot. So let's head over to Solaris now and configure the USD. So here we are in Solaris. All I have in the stage at the moment is a material library. I went ahead and set up my materials. I have in total 6 because 3 of the shaders are principal shaders for Karma, and 3 of the shaders are PXR Disney shaders for Renderman 23. I've already attached the texture maps, and something very cool is the collect node in Houdini 18 in Solaris, which collects different shaders. They can be for different renderers, obviously, and it automatically assigns the corresponding shader for the renderer which is being used. So that's pretty cool. And so the material flags on the collect nodes should be set if the autofill materials is to work correctly. So that will populate the material VOPs up here using the collect node names. For any subnetwork or shader with a material flag set to on, the material library will populate that as well. So watch out for that. You don't want to have extra materials up here because those will become primitives in or layers in USD. So to be efficient, you only have to populate the ones that you really need. What else is here? 3 light setup plus a grid and a camera, which I'll be using for testing the USD asset later. So I guess at this point I'll just start building the network, and I'll just comment here and there. The variant one, or the default variant, will be the thin grass. So this one that's already on Sketchfab, and it consists of two parts. One is the tall grass blades, and the other one is the short grass blades. The rest consists of a single mesh, a single object. So what you can see is that vertex colors are brought over to lobes. However, materials aren't. So I'll be referencing the materials here in a few minutes. All of these nodes will become layers, and they have to be saved out to disk. So a layer save path must be specified. And I already have the asset directory, but you don't have to. All of the files and folders will be created once the USD ROP is attached to the end of the network, and the save to disk is executed. For example, I decided to have the geometry saved out to a folder called geo, which doesn't exist yet. Something else to point out is that the primitive kinds by default go from group to component, and I would like to have a pot plant primitive, which is the root primitive of type of kind component, and then the pot and the grass be subcomponents of that component. So it's possible to set that directly on the SOP import, but I like to set that explicitly by using configure primitive lob. And I guess let's take care of the variants for the grass first. The variant set field contains a name, so it can be an arbitrary name, whatever you decide to name your variant set. In this case, I will leave it to model because I have 3 different models for the grass, and so that's appropriate. Also, the variant name picks the value, the operator, the string value of the loop, which comes into the multi-input. So one way to change the names is by appending nulls. Here it is. And let's configure the variants for the pod shaders. So because everything's a layer in USD, the material library and the materials are a layer, so they have to be configured as well. Just as I set a layer safe path here, the materials have to have a layer safe path as well, and that can be accomplished by using the configure layer lop. And I will save this out to a folder called materials. And now let's reference the materials in here. And so what you can see here is all 3 materials being referenced under the pod primitive. So let's only reference one of the materials per variant. So we need 3 variants. And for each, let's just reference one of the materials. And this is the reference primitive path. So watch out not to drag and drop from the scene graph here. That will result in an error because the materials being referenced live on a different layer. They live on the materials layer. So one way to do it is by pinning the materials and then dragging and dropping. And now we have to assign them. And now the variant analogy is almost the same. Let's drop a few nulls for the names. And name our variant set to shader rather than model, because the variants are on the shaders only. Again, it doesn't matter, you can pick your name. The set variant selection is ticked, which means the add variant loop will automatically pick the last input of the multi-input and set that as the default variant. And I like to set the variant myself with the set variant loop. And the sync will be the default. And same on this side. You can also right click and pick the variant. I'll pick the thin grass in this case as the default. And now I have to bring these two together. There we have it. The pot plant is the root primitive, and that's the asset, and of component kind, and it consists of the grass and the pot as its subcomponents with their variant sets. And we have a warning here. It's warning that there is no safe path. So one or more of the inputs are not configured. So let's configure that. And at this point, we're configuring the add variant. So that's a layer. So we need to specify where the variant layer lives on disk. And I'll just leave that at the root asset folder. I like to use the operator string here and name the lob something like grass variants. Again, you can pick whatever name you like, and I'll save it out as a USD, which is a human readable format, so you can open that in a text editor later. The USD in this case it will only contain references to the geometry, so I'd say that's okay to be human readable. But for data which is perhaps intellectual property or sensitive, I would definitely stick to the USD. So up here, these USDs contain the actual 3D geometry. So and let's configure the reference as well. just use the operator string here as well, because I like to see the file names that I'm gonna get. And finally, let's attach the USD ROP. So I'll call this asset because that's the one that I'll be ingesting in a minute to test it. So this one will only contain a single reference to the pot plant, and the pot plant will have the variants for the pot as well as a reference to the variants for the grass, and those will have references for the geometry which is in the USD files. So I guess that's all. I hope I don't have any errors here, but we're gonna find out in a minute. So let's save to disk and check the folders. I have a materials file which is not defined, so let's check what went wrong. Yes, I forgot the file extension on the configure layer lop, and also let's put the materials. As a matter of fact, I didn't forget the lop. I didn't forget the file extension. I forgot to specify the file name. So that would be pot plant materials.usd. This will contain the shader information for recreating the shaders later. Let's get rid of this one and save to disk. And there we go. All of it is written out. So here's the single reference to a pot plant. That's like a link, basically. And then pot plant contains the variant set for the pot, which has references to the geometry as well as the shaders. And then it also has a link for the grass variants, and so the grass variants contains the variant set for the grass, pointing to the geometry on disk. So once the pot plant asset.usda is ingested, that will kind of propagate upstream and recreate the asset. So let's save the scene and give it a try. So one way to bring USD assets in LOPS is by using the stage manager. Another way is by using a sublayer. Both of these will work. I prefer the stage manager, and it's giving errors for some reason. I hope Side Effects is working on that. They're not critical errors, so that everything will work, but it's just a bit annoying. So let's ingest the pot plant asset and duplicate it a couple times. Normally you'd be able to set the variants directly in here, but given the structure that we have with the component, two subcomponents on which the variants exist, that's not possible. So let's set those manually or explicitly. I already have the thin grass and the zinc which should be the default. I'll keep it at this, and then for asset 2, let's change to the ribbon grass, and the brass, and let's add 2 more. For asset 3, grass, twisting grass, and pot. Metal gun, is it? Yeah. Let's offset them a little bit so we can see them next to each other. And the easiest way I found to select them and just move them around is by using the scene graph tree. And voila, it works. Alright folks, thanks for sticking around. I hope this was useful, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!